it's always fascinating to me how an audience kind of automatically knows when it's time to begin, and that conversation begins to quiet down, and it just becomes apparent. As many of you know, I am not Russ Baker. I am Bruce Nevin. I'm treasurer of the Peace Council, Martha's Vineyard Peace Council, one of the two organizations sponsoring this event. The other being the Social Action Committee of the Martha's Vineyard Hebrew Center. Jerry Danzig has been very active with this, and Antigone. So on your chairs you will have seen a little shameless solicitation from the Peace Council. We have a scholarship that we give annually, and we're dependent entirely on donations. And a few years ago we had a generous donation that brought us 25% of the way to the threshold for an endowment under the Permanent Endowment of Martha's Vineyard to begin providing its earnings to the annual scholarship. It has to get to $20,000 before. And below that level, the earnings of the money go to the Permanent Endowment and their activities. So that's what that's about. Another thing I wanted to mention, was asked to mention, our resources, the activists have been rather divided this summer. And there's another organization called 350 Martha's Vineyard Island, concerned with climate change, and you may have seen signs like this popping up around the island. So Chris Freed, whose brilliant idea this was, has suggested that you could get these signs, which you can get from him, and actually slice off the top part of it and give it some sort of perduring usefulness as a reminder to people, hey, let's pay attention to what's happening to our planet. Here. Let's see, one more thing. Well, of course, as I obey myself, the usual about cell phones. And so I'm turning mine down. And we have some refreshments, which we will be, after the talk and the Q&A, when we want to continue with just conversation, during the Q&A perhaps, we will carry the refreshments out here where we can commingle and enjoy them and enjoy one another's company. So please linger for that. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Russ Baker. He first came to the island as a guest of the speaker for the Peace Council in 2010 and drew the largest audience that Betty Burton had ever had at the Vineyard Haven Library Speakers Program. I think there were 126 people standing only in that space that's kind of downstairs in the library was chock-a-block. And he was here last year with a somewhat smaller audience. We had some difficulty getting the word out this year. It didn't actually get printed in the paper, but I'm really happy to see familiar faces, people that I know, familiar faces, people that I should like to know, and happy to see faces that I'm not familiar with. This is a real delight. So Russ Baker, and I'm sort of studying back and forth, Russ Baker is the founder of whowhatwhy.com, which I recommend to your attention as a vehicle for getting out the fruits of intensive investigative reporting to give us an understanding of what's really going on in the stories that you read about in the paper and hear on the news, and the stories that you don't read about in the paper and don't hear about in the news, and to get an understanding of how power really works in this country, in this world today. And we have to have that understanding before we can bring about any change. He is the author of this marvelous book, Family Secrets. Many of you have read it, and many of you have copies. Carrie here has some on sale for, Carrie is Russ's associate, on sale for $20, which is a little less than the list price. And I highly recommend it. In-depth exploration of the last 50 years of United States history and what's been going on that is not apparent on the surface and certainly not apparent in the disinformation that we commonly dished out. So without further ado, I invite you to hear and see Russ Baker.
Bruce is a little taller than I am. It's great to be here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to Bruce Nevin, Sarah Nevin, and Jerry Danzig for putting this together. I always enjoy coming to the Vineyard. I mean, who wouldn't? And really terrific people there. I was just saying to Carrie, there are very few places, certainly in the United States, and I think in the world, that has such an interesting mixture of people, and so many people who are intelligent and who care about things. So one just sort of soaks that up when one is here. I always like to start, at least in the last year, by doing a mic check for the National Security Agency. I hope nobody minds. Just want to make sure they're hearing me loud and clear. First of all, I should also ask, were any of you there today? I spoke at the Rotary Club. Anybody there today? A few of you. Okay, so I will try to not use any of the same jokes. It won't be easy, but I did want to make the very important point. I don't know if you heard that originally I was scheduled to debate Alan Dershowitz here. The topic was going to be, is the high price of corned beef anti-Semitic? But unfortunately he canceled. He found it too intimidating. And he's shy. I mean, one of the things that I find wherever I travel, we were just in Minneapolis, or I should say St. Paul. They get very, very offended if you say Minneapolis. And we actually discovered that even though you can actually ride your bike in a short time from Minneapolis to St. Paul, nobody from Minneapolis will go to St. Paul. And when we said that we were in a bookstore in St. Paul, they all said, oh. And so I've noticed this all over the place. On the island, it's apparently, Shillmark against Oak Bluffs, against Edgartown. I remember I was staying with Bruce and Sarah and Mike Wallace, who late lamented journalist who I knew, and I called him up and he said, oh, where are you staying? And I said, Edgartown, and he said, oh, excuse me. And that was Mike Wallace, who made a bigger salary than I did. So anyway, but actually, and of course then we have to say, can't we all just get along? But actually we are sort of getting along, and in a weird way, just a little item from an Oklahoma newspaper, Oklahoma, mind you, not the most liberal place in the country, that said that about 200 Democrats, Republicans, and Libertarians, conservatives and liberals, hawks and doves, show their opposition to U.S. intervention in the Syrian civil war in a nonpartisan rally at the Oklahoma Capitol on Friday. There also was the congressional vote on surveillance. Didn't get the kind of attention it should have. I thought that should have been big headlines that almost a majority of Congress, well, at least almost half the people voting, voted to roll back all of these decisions that have been made, basically enabling the president and the national security apparatus to do pretty much whatever they want in terms of spying on us. That's pretty remarkable. A lot of Democrats and a lot of Republicans got together. It was a completely bipartisan thing, and I believe that what that's telling us is that something really is changing in the country. Something big is afoot. I can certainly feel it. And I've seen it over the last 4 or 5 years, particularly quickening in the last few months. There is something exciting going on here. I remember when the Arab Spring began in the Middle East, and if you read Who, What, Why, you know that from our investigative reporting that not all Arab Springs are made equal. And some of them are one thing, and some of them are another. An easy way to figure it out is try to figure out which one the American Secretary of State is for, and which ones are not. And that's a very, very interesting issue. Perhaps we can get into a little bit in the Q&A. But it is a new day, and as I like to joke, or maybe not joke, if we have all these revolutions going on all over the world, who knows, maybe it could even happen here. Maybe we could actually have budding democracy in this country. And then I say, nah, that's asking a bit much. Could we ever overcome the institutionalized corruption in this country, the tremendous big money, the corporations, the strange thing how every president, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican, a conservative or a liberal, you notice how they do so many of the same things. They're different on some hot button social issues that appeal to the base, And even those, they have to be dragged kicking and screaming. But on these big issues of war and peace and money and some of the other issues, doing something about climate change, there doesn't seem to be that big a difference. And then you have to ask yourself why. And once you start asking yourself why, then you start asking yourself, well, since there doesn't seem to be any change or any real democracy, what about all this spying on us? Who's spying on us, and what is this all about? Certainly I've been wondering about that, and fascinated to see that establishment figures like Chris Christie, the governor of New Jersey, who apparently now is a media favorite to run for president, he recently attacked libertarian Republicans for being naive about national security. And you have to wonder who's naive, because if you actually ask a question that never gets asked in the mainstream media and rarely gets asked in the so-called alternative media, I'm not anymore too big a fan of either of those, and maybe we can talk about that later, and why we started Who, What, Why as a sort of a third way, and we came to the conclusion that even the so-called alternative media was basically part of the establishment. I know that sounds kind of strange, but not if you understand a little bit more about how artificial conflicts are fabricated. The naivete on national security is about the question of what is national security? What are we being protected from? And I think I've earned the right to say that because I live in Manhattan, because I was covering the attack on the Twin Towers on November 11, 2001 for a major establishment newspaper. Because I was standing there, I actually ran in while the buildings they had literally just collapsed. It was a giant cloud of dust. I didn't know what was happening. Everyone was running away, and I was running in, as a reporter is supposed to. And then a little bit later, I was standing in front of a building called Building 7, and I saw it amazingly collapse so neatly in front of me. I was talking to an editor at the Los Angeles Times, and I described it, and he said, well, that's a controlled demolition. And I said, well, I don't know what it is, but boy, if that was an accident, that's the neatest accident I've ever seen. Anyway, I can't answer any more about that, but all of these make us think. We did some articles on Who, What, Why I commend to you. One is about a house in Sarasota, Florida, where about 10 days before the attacks, a Saudi family suddenly left in a big hurry and left their cars behind and dirty diapers and food on the table, and they just took off and didn't come back. And we looked into it along with the Miami Herald, this story you've never heard in any of the mainstream or alternative media. They have never covered this story, and this is about this family and how the gate records of that gated community indicate that Mohammed Atta and some of the other people who are allegedly were the hijackers were all visiting this house either for dinner or making telephone calls, and that the FBI knew about it and were in there and then shut the whole thing down. That this was kept from the 9/11 Commission. Senator Graham confirmed that to us, that it was kept from them. He was very, very disturbed about this. We traced the ownership of that house to a man who runs a major Saudi corporation, working directly for one of the most powerful Saudi princes. Now, you can speculate about where that all leads, but that does seem to be something that law enforcement and all the people protecting our national security should be interested in. And I say if they want to spy on us, why not start with telling us about that house? But they don't. And they just keep talking about how endangered we all are and how they're doing something about it by spying on us. And I don't know if you've seen some of these recent news reports about here that the NSA let slip that it doesn't just look at alleged suspects and their phone calls, but it looks at one hop away people that they call, and then it said they were forced to admit, well, no, actually we look 2 hops away. And recently they were forced to admit, no, we look 3 hops away. And according to one study that was done, everyone is 4.74 hops away. Anyway, there have been all kinds of interesting stories. Has anybody heard about the recent detentions of Glenn Greenwald's domestic partner? Do you all know who Glenn Greenwald is?
Yes.
Glenn was somebody who like me, nobody heard about a few years ago. I wouldn't say nobody, but he really had to work hard and sweat a lot over a number of years because what he was talking about was deliberately ignored. He would write those terrific pieces at Salon, and it took a number of years, and finally he became a little bit of a star there, and then The Guardian picked him up, and then the rest of the media tried to ignore The Guardian, but they can't really do that anymore, including, again, some of the alternative, so-called alternative media. Anyway, I bring, by the way, I bring more pages of random notes to myself than most people do of single-spaced prepared comments, and I sort of never know what I'm going to talk about. I kind of look out there and see people are falling asleep. And by the way, be honest with me. If you're getting bored, just yawn or wave or something, because I can't move on and talk about something else. And one of the things, by the way, I just the book Family of Secrets. I recently was visiting a sleep doctor who actually told me that he'd been reading my book, but he had to stop because he could no longer sleep at night. Okay. But anyway, Glenn Greenwald, his domestic partner, was in Berlin seeing a woman who works with Glenn, flying back to Rio. He had to stop in London, and they grabbed him. The Brits grabbed him, the police, and they held him for 9 hours. That's a long time. I've been held a couple of times at Kennedy Airport. They never tell you why they're holding you. And you don't know if this is just to kind of freak you out. My joke is that it was a case of mistaken identity. They mixed me up with somebody named Ras al-Bakr. I really don't know, because they never tell you. You see, they don't have to tell you anything. Isn't that the beauty? While they're protecting us, they don't have to tell us anything, even when they make a mistake. And you did see the New York Times, and they do, the mainstream media does some good work, particularly when it's really easy and safe. And there's a study that they can quote, and there's some study or something showing that there were something like 2,000, I've got it here somewhere, 2,000 some instances where they accidentally, you believe this, they accidentally spied on people. They said it was all an accident and they just need better coordination inside the NSA, which is not very reassuring since those are the people who are protecting us. And also, by the way, if you study the protection, what's very interesting is how many, let me ask you, how many terrorist attacks have there been since 9/11?
Well, how many have they claimed?
Well, how many have there been that we know of? None, right? Okay, and how many? Okay, and then the question is, how many did they stop? And this is very interesting because when they get these people before Congress, they hem and they haw. So, well, they said 75, that there may possibly kind of sort of been some indirect involvement of electronic eavesdropping in apprehending these people who may kind of possibly sort of have been up to something, and forgetting to mention that, oh, by the way, about 80% of them may have been recruited in the first place by the FBI, which is a whole other story we could get into. The FBI has a long, long history. One of my favorite things is, that the old saying, the FBI always gets its man. Watch those shows, Dragnet and all that stuff. Well, no wonder they always get their man, because it's always their man. So, and I don't mean to be too harsh on them. I suppose they mean well, and I suppose they're trying as best as they can. But honestly, I spent years looking at the John F. Kennedy assassination and reading FBI memos, and boy, they misspell everything. And you look at that, and you wonder, is that accidental or is it that deliberate, and what's worse? So, in a country where there's so many people who need jobs, and it's a great job, and it's well paid, and the security side, you wonder why they keep hiring people who can't even spell, literally, the names of the key people in the memo. And then later they say, oh, well, the reason we couldn't stop that thing or something was because it was misfiled. I mean, honestly, they say this all the time. And, of course, this then becomes these kind of things. If it wasn't the FBI, it would be an excuse for outsourcing. And by the way, there is a lot of outsourcing. I know you've seen this. Originally, we were supposed to have a thing called the peace dividend. You remember that? The end of history, according to, what's the guy's name? What's the name of the guy who wrote that book, The End of History? From Dartmouth. Anyway, he was a great hero of people who said that we won the Cold War, and now there would be a peace dividend, and all the potholes would be fixed, and all the money, teachers would be the highest paid people out there, and it would all be fixed. And of course, nothing happened. And one of the reasons nothing happened was they immediately had all these new bogeymen, all these new things to worry about, and I think it wasn't enough that they were able to say that China was a threat, and because you've heard about this, how many people have heard that China is breaking into American computers? How many of you heard of that? Okay, see, this is a big meme in the mainstream media that China's breaking into American computers. How many of you heard the story that America is breaking into Chinese computers? Not as many of you. See, this is interesting. And this is one of the reasons they don't like Edward Snowden and they don't like Glenn Greenwald. My own opinion, this is just my opinion, maybe new information will appear that will change my mind. So far, I would rate all of those people great American patriots. That's just my take. And what I find interesting is I remember when we go to the 4th of July parade and there's all these people wearing, veteran Edgartown and all these people wearing their vets hats and waving flags, and then there's Bruce and I don't know, Bruce and Sarah and some animals wearing peace signs and people looking at them and smirking, and it's kind of, and a few people applauding. It's nice to hear that. I think they imported them from somewhere else on the island. But anyway, what's kind of funny is that all of these people are so they love. All those people do those reenactments of the Civil War and the Revolutionary War and stuff. You ever talk about those people? They all say, lock them up. Julian Assange and Bradley Manning. Did you hear they sentenced him to 35 years today? I mean, and you look at those documents, and I'll tell you, who, what, why. We're not the only New York Times, The Guardian, and others, but we are now doing it consistently. We're one of our people, one of our writers, has access to some of those documents, and we vet them. We look at them and we do research. We do actual research to try to figure out, are they real? What do they mean? What's the context? And then we write about them. And I would say not all of them are really stuff that the public needs to know. I think ambassadors should have the right to write something and say, I think that the president of Argentina is offered meds, and that doesn't need to be published. I agree with that. I think that all of us have the right to write your shopping list and not have it published to the world. But some of these things, like that horrible helicopter kill, do you remember that? Did you see that? Where American soldiers knew pretty much that they were, I think, killing civilians, and they were doing it like a video game. They were just so pleased to be shooting, not just to keep people, but other people around. If you haven't seen it, you really want to watch that video.
With Bradley Manning exposed.
Yes, with Bradley Manning exposed, yeah. Oh, wonderful. Does anybody know how long I've been going? It feels like hours. Hours. 20 minutes. Why don't I go for like 5 or 10 more minutes, and then we'll do like a really long Q&A. Would that be good? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir.
Well, it's a synagogue, And I just made that one up on the spot. All right. He doesn't work with me. Okay, what else are we talking
Is that a plan, bro? We'll have that essay as well, but.
Okay, I gotta read you this. This is great. So I started this thing called Who, What, Why. How many of you had heard of it before you came here today?
Yes.
A few of you, okay, and the rest of you hadn't. How many of you had heard of it for a week ago? A few of you. Okay, well, wonderful, wonderful. Let me just tell you a little bit about my sort of background. I work for all sorts of news organizations, and I've taken paychecks from everybody from The Nation magazine to Fox News, so I've really been ecumenical. I've tried to be. I try to be open-minded about things. I have my own prejudices and biases, but I really try to be curious and see if we can establish some facts. And I think that's so important because in this country over the last, I don't know how many years, we've gone from a point where people kind of agreed on at least some facts to the point where they don't agree on anything. You talk to people, they don't believe there's such a thing as evolution. People don't believe anybody landed on the moon. I mean, these are large swaths of the population. And there is a reason that people disagree about these things. There actually is a reason. People have become more and more convinced that they're being lied to. And I've discovered that the public is bifurcated between sort of two groups that subscribe to two sets of media. There are people who love curators with credentials. That's the first time I've used that. I like that. I'm gonna Carrie remind me of that one. The curators with credentials. I'm gonna use that again because this is sort of people who like people with good Ivy League degrees. They've been on, Oprah or Dr. Oz, PBS, NPR, New York Times, The New Yorker, Atlantic Monthly. If you're feeling mortified and these are where you get all the information, I got news for you. You don't know the whole story. And I like those places. They're very, very well written and very well edited. They're very smart. But all of them do what in the CIA parlance they call a limited hangout. That's where you admit part of the story and you don't tell the rest of it. And I know about this because if you go to dinner parties and things, you always have kind of a nice conversation about your favorite, PBS, NPR, and there's probably somebody here who works there and love you dearly. But they do good stuff, but those things all softened up over the years. Did you notice that? A lot of it is actually the style. You have a person with a very special way of talking, and then they have the realities in the background, clacking plates, and they say, Mario Garcia, 32, works in the kitchen. And then you think, wow, I'm really getting, a kind of a liberal, touchy-feely radio thing, but, try to think about what they told you about the U.S. intervention in Libya or in Syria, and look really hard, and you'll discover that they almost never had much stuff suggesting that this was not necessarily a great idea, that the U.S. and NATO weren't necessarily really going into those places strictly for altruistic reasons. This is a problem, and so part of the population adheres to sort of the mainstream Libya, which I think media, which I think just the mainstream Libya. Okay, one of the funniest things to me is that people like Sarah Palin and that ilk like to attack the media as a bunch of rabid leftists. Well, you cannot be a rabid leftist when you have 3 children in graduate school. It's hard. I'm not saying you can't, but it's hard. And then the other group is the so-called alternative media, and these are all your favorite magazines, weekly magazines, and so forth. If you get solicitations to go on their cruise, then that's the one. Or another one that does whatever they do. And then there's a TV show, and they have no production values, and so you feel like, wow, this is really the truth, and a woman with a kind of a scratchy, raspy voice, and you say, gotta be the truth, because there are no production values there. And then you watch that show, and they have 2 different people on arguing about what to do about Syria. And here's the argument. One is arguing that the U.S. should just go in and blow out the Assad regime or whatever it takes, and the other one vociferously disagrees and said there should be only non-lethal aid to the opposition. And then you scratch your head and you say, are there no other possibilities there? What's actually going on there? Admittedly, this guy is no walk in the park, but I mean, is he actually noticeably worse than all the people that we've always supported in that region? You have to ask yourself that question. Any serious good journalist would ask yourself, but you can't do it. And what happened was the national security establishment was so clever. They looked at the Arab Spring. If they weren't involved very early on, which there are more and more signs that they were, shake things up a little bit, keep things lively, more opportunities for the weapons suppliers, new clients. But if they weren't, they were not seemingly for the Egyptian Arab Spring, you remember that. But then they were so thrilled with that one in Libya, and boy, they were in there early, and remember then they had to do the no-fly zone, and then quickly they said, we've got to bomb the Libyan people to advance democracy there. So they did that, and then, there was nothing in the media. There was total silence, even among all your favorite peace outfits, and the reason was they got tricked. They did an end run on them. Once they, instead of basically using a kind of more conservative right-wing thing, they just said, hey, we're about women's rights, we're about minorities and protecting people there and democracy and freedom, and then nobody wanted to be against that. And so that's sort of, I think, what happened. I want to just talk for another minute or two about the national security, because I did promise to talk about it. Anyone, if you've heard my talks before, don't answer this question. Do you know how many people in this country have top secret security clearance? And only answer if you don't know the answer, if you're guessing.
1 million.
1 million, okay. Anybody else want to guess? A couple million. Is anybody going to guess 4?
Too many.
Too many? Okay. Well, you see, the problem here is he spoiled it by saying 1 million, because usually people say, 200 or 10,000, and then I get to say 3.4 million.
Wow.
Probably a few people in the room, I can't ask them because they have top security clearance. And you know what comes with top secret clearance? What comes with that? You can't talk about it. Yeah, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. So we talk about it, they haul you off, and you share a cell with Bradley Manning for the next 35 years. So this whole game is kind of rigged because you can't know anything about it. And many years ago, when I was at the Village Voice, I did a big thing on the CIA, and I met all these people from these places, and they basically told me that the big joke was on Congress. You know how Congress is the one outfit that's looking after our interests, right? And then all these so-called liberal Democrats come up and they say, we can assure you it's all under control. We are checking this all out. Well, the truth of the matter is, how do they know? How does Nancy Pelosi know anything about any of this stuff? It's very complicated. You need people really grounded. And so, of course, they don't know anything about this. So what they do, first of all, they're sworn to secrecy, and then they get briefings from their staff. Now, what's their staff? I was told that when they were creating a staff, the concern was, how do you get staff who really understand what the CIA is up to? And what do you suppose they did? They asked the CIA, hey, do you know anybody who can come over and be staff? I kid you not. And so this is what we're dealing with in this country, and it seems to me, and it seems to us at Who, What, Why, that we need to know this stuff. Because some people say, well, that's so depressing. Would you stop? Because, I want to go back and do my yoga, or, I like to compost, and, and I admit those are good things, and they make us feel better, but you really need to be involved in knowing what the heck is going on. Because if you know what's going on, and you tell other people, guess what? Eventually, everybody knows what's going on, and once people know what's going on, if they don't like it, they get mad. And when they get mad, people who run for office and need their approval get worried, and then they start changing what they're doing. It's a really simple formula. And so we started Who, What, Why. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan news organization. We started it in 2005 with me running up my very meager credit balances on my credit cards. And we started with nothing, and I wrote most of the articles. We've been growing quite a bit lately. We don't accept ads. All of our funding comes from people like you. Everybody doesn't want to give us money, and they say, why don't you ask George Soros or Oprah? So they haven't given us any money yet, so we really rely on ordinary people. And it makes a difference. We brought in some terrific people. We were planning to grow a lot in the next 6 months, year, or 2 years. We were hoping that about 2 years from now, you will say to your friends, hey, I heard that guy speak when nobody was paying too much attention to them. And they are now an internationally known news organization that you can turn to every day, maybe even every hour, for straight talk about what the heck is going on. That's what we're trying to do. We have some copies of my book, Family and Secrets here. I promise you it's a good read. It gives you a glimpse into the story you don't get. This is a book basically about the Bush dynasty and how could a guy like George W. Bush become the most powerful person in the world. I spent 5 years trying to answer that. It's not a polemic, it's a murder mystery of sorts. And I was astonished after about 1.5 years. I fell down a rabbit's hole. And I was like, whoa, I didn't understand anything about what was really going on in this country, or why a guy like Obama, who seems so great, and then gets in there, and then you're like, what is going on? This guy is, he keeps Bush's defense secretary, and he's at all those same gatherings of the richest 1%, and he's here golfing with the guy from UBS Bank that was, do you know about that? They were giving people shredders so they could they were giving people shredders, people who were evading taxes, shredders and unlisted cell phones so that they could stiff the rest of us. And he golfs with that man here. I don't know if they did it this year because we've certainly been making some noise about it. But you start wondering what's going on that we can't seem to get any kind of change. I hope you'll pick up a copy of Family of Secrets. I'm happy to sign it. Carrie has a sheet here if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter. I can't promise you that the NSA won't also make a copy, but they probably already know who you all are. We send it out maybe once a week. It's 1 or 2 emails. It's about it. Please write neatly because otherwise your neighbor will get your email. That, I think, is it. So I'm going to say thank you, and we'll do some Q&A, and then we will go outside and eat and drink. Thank you. Yes, young lady.
Well, I have a deep burning question about what you actually think went on with 9/11.
Deep burning question about what I actually think went on with 9/11. So this is the question that when you answer it, your career is immediately ruined. Even a career outside the establishment such as mine is now. I have no idea what happened. I think that most of these things are layered. If you read our website, we've been going into Boston looking at this very strange bombing of the marathon. I know you're not supposed to talk about it within a few hundred miles of Boston because it's so unsettling. And I've noticed when you mention people sort of look down at the floor, it's very disturbing, this kind of thing. But I'll just tell you, I mean, right away after this thing happened, and they said they had no idea. Does anybody know these people in this video where we suspect them of doing the bombing because they're wearing backpacks? And I said, well, everybody else in the video is wearing, where's this coming from? And then all these other things started happening, and then they said, we have no idea who these people are, we don't know their names, does anybody, can they identify them? And then the Russians said, we can, remember that, we can, because we've been following them, and you've been following them, and we told you, and then the mother said, I can, because you guys have been, your FBI's been in and out of our house for years. I just think right away, I'm sorry, it sounds like I'm ducking the question, but I think also with 9/11 that you have to say, why on 9/11 and on the bombing, did you know they had drills during both days? People got confused because they had drills. They had a drill in Boston that was underway, was in the works, for a security drill involving backpack bombers. I mean, how did these things happen? On 9/11, how did they have a drill with a fake hijacking and scrambling planes? And then all the military people said, well, we thought it was the drill. So I don't want to get more into this because when you do, I don't want to get any more into 9/11. And I have a rule, one question on a topic, because otherwise the whole thing goes down a bottomless pit. Have some wine, then let's talk about it. Okay, another subject. No, by the way, no statements, please. Let's just do questions. Yes, sir, there.
Yeah. I think we're on the eve of a campaign to get colleges and universities, public agencies, and other organizations to divest from fossil fuel companies and reinvest in energy saving companies, sustainable energy companies. And I'm wondering, I think this will really start up in the fall, what the prospects are for this campaign. Is it really likely to take off, or is it likely to fizzle?
So the question was, can your campaign to get universities and other institutions to divest from fuel companies, I assume this is related to trying to save the planet and an obscure goal. That was a joke. My take is, yes, you can have an impact. I actually believe activists could have an impact, but the thing is, it's all about how many people find out about what you're doing. I've seen your signs all over the island. I mean, one wonders, I'm guessing the media kind of ignored them, but if I was following Obama around, there was nothing happening. I would focus on the signs and who's doing the signs, and did Obama see them, and what does he think, and does he think he did what he should have on that. So I would say absolutely, your activism has an impact. People say, well, what can I do? But the truth is, our website, Who, What, Why, has been growing. We've doubled our traffic in a month. And the reason is because folks like you, even if all you do is you get up in the morning and you look at our site and you click those Facebook and Twitter and those other social media share buttons, or you forward it to your list, other people see it and it starts multiplying. And so you sort of be the media, you become the media, and you decide what's worth sharing with people. You have your own bullhorn. So I would say absolutely. When enough people know about something and are made to care, and I think the problem in our society is that our bandwidth is very limited. We have very, very limited time and very limited space in our brains for anything other than our own personal immediate concerns. And some abstract thing like no life on Earth in 40 years, we just can't deal with it, and it also seems too big. And so I was just over at Kronig's Market, and I kid you not, but every one of those tabloid magazines had a Kardashian on the cover, you know, and so they fill, this is a plot, folks, you know, to fill the world up with Kardashians so there's no time to talk about 350. So, yeah, that is a problem. Let me go way in the back, ma'am, there.
Just this week, Al Jazeera America made its debut on television. I have found that it's very hard to get a credible source of news when I flip on the tube, so I rarely turn it on. What are your thoughts about this particular news station?
The question was, what do I think about Al Jazeera America, which is their new entity. I've learned that it's better not to comment on other news organizations in too much detail. I will say this, on some things they are much better than other outfits. They seem to have a brief to do pretty good coverage of the United States. And I find they're pretty vigorous about that, or about U.S. policy in Latin America or something. Unfortunately, when it comes to the Middle East, they are owned by the Emir of Qatar, and they do, I think, a rather one-sided job. I have heard privately from people who work for Al Jazeera thanking us for a piece we did, holding their feet to the fire. If you go to our website, Who, What, Why, and you just type in Al Jazeera in the box, you can read about that. Let's see, yeah.
I find it's somewhat ironic that you seem to be shying away from 9/11. My question is not about 9/11, and this is a question, not a statement. But you know, 9/11 is really the litmus. This the whole war on terror started with 9/11. I mean, it goes back to JFK, I think, but it's spread out over 50 years, so we're not so aware of it. But you said let's limit this to one subject, one question, or one subject. So right away, you don't want to talk about 9/11.
Well, that's not true, because I actually brought it up myself, and I talked about it. And I said that we did an article about Saudi possible complicity in 9/11. I don't know how you could say that.
Well, I mean, when this lady said, you said, let's try not...
Well, because this is exactly what happens, and it just...
I haven't asked my...
Okay, and your question is?
My piece is, well, you said when you were at 9/11, you went into one building, and then you watched 7 fall, just like a controlled demolition. And you were talking with an editor, and you said you don't want to go there, and you couldn't go there anymore. But so you're saying the same thing. We shouldn't talk about these things.
No, I'm not saying that, but the problem is there's a kind of a weird obsession in this country of certain people, and I do think something has flipped in their brains. It's not that that is not important, and I will talk about it, but it is not the only issue. It is a part of a possible long-term series of things that are extremely complicated. I'll just tell you this, I do not believe that the entire U.S. government was involved in a plot against the American people, okay? I don't believe that. I don't believe personally that Larry Silverstein pulled his buildings deliberately. I don't believe that.
You believe controlled demolitions were used?
I don't know. It looked like, I said that, it looked like a controlled demolition to me. But the fact of the matter is, I don't think people would be too happy with our journalism if we were mostly pontificating without having done any research. The research we have done so far has led to this house in Sarasota, Florida. I implore you to read that and look at that, because that is hard. Okay, that's hard evidence. We want to look at other things, but I don't know how much anybody here has donated to us, but we are entirely nonprofit. We can't do anything without people funding us, and it is the 9/11 fanatics who are the most aggressive in demanding that we do something about this, and the least supportive in terms of writing checks. They literally say, I'll give you $50 if you write about this. violence. Well, no, thank you. There are a lot of issues, and I would say this. We would make a commitment to set up a team to work only on 9/11 stories if substantial monies came in to fund it. We're willing to look at any story. Okay, yes, sir.
You've given a very dismal depiction of the United States and its society and government. What would you do about it?
This gentleman said, I've given a very dismal picture of the United States and society. What would I do about it? Well, here I am in a synagogue. We can all pray.
That's a good one.
Thank you. That's new, too. What would I do about it? Look, I don't think most people are evil. And weirdly enough, I don't even think most of the people who do bad things are evil. You know all about Mr. Eichmann and his explanation that he was a bureaucrat. And this is the sad thing. There are hundreds of thousands of people who every day millions of people who do despicable things because they work for a large corporation, they work for an agency of the government, they work for a police department, they work for a charity, and they're asked to do something that they don't think they should do. The problem is we're all asked all the time to do things and to compromise our values, and it's not easy to do the right thing. I don't think I'm perfect. I work very hard at trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to be as honest with you as I can be without breaking down and crying. But it's a problem, and I think it would be healthy in this country if there was more transparency and if we were all more human and we talked about, look, I'd like to do the right thing. I'd like to hear more people talking about how within their organizations they're trying to sort of gradually make it more accountable without necessarily being unemployed. I think incremental things really do make a difference. And all these organizations that are trying to make corporations more accountable on a green level and on these other levels, I think they're actually having an impact. So I am, weirdly enough, I remain hopeful in general. Ma'am in the back there, and let's do maybe 3 more questions. Okay.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago I heard a former NSA person talking about the surveillance scene, and he said, well, this really wasn't a secret. Congressional committees knew about it, the administration knew about it, blah, blah, blah. He said it was only a secret to the public. So my question is, do you see this lack of transparency and considering things only a secret to the public as something that has evolved slowly over time, or was there a sort of a point at which things shifted and the attitude changed that was acceptable?
The question was a former NSA person saying that all of these improprieties on the part of the security state were known to elected representatives and other people, just not known to the public. Is this something new? I don't think it is. I think that has always been the case. I think that the way power works is if you are a few people and you have a lot of power, the only way you keep power is to keep the majority of people from figuring out what is going on. And what more brilliant way to do that than to tell everybody you can't know about this for your own good. And so the whole system is sort of rigged. Family of Secrets is really all about that. How the Bush family, going back 4 generations, they were on 2 different grandfathers were working for one of the most powerful families in America. I mean, that's who they were, that's whose tune they were dancing to, that's whose tune they are dancing to. Fortunately, some of the children in some of those families now regret it and actually are supporting what we're doing, which is wonderful, and shows that all kinds of redemption can take place. But I think this has always been going on, and a lot of this stuff about classification of records is a crock. I don't know if you know about this, on Who, What, Why, we write a lot about the Kennedy assassination. Here we are, it's the 50th anniversary of the Kennedy assassination, a mystery that A, has never really been solved. If you think it was Oswald doing it alone, and it was Oswald who could keep 50,000 documents still classified this year about the Kennedy assassination, I suggest it might be otherwise. And you have to look at this stuff and say, what is going on? Why would they keep... If this lone kook who was a pro-Soviet guy did it, why would they keep 50,000 documents about that subject under lock and key? And of course the answer is all of these things turn out to be much more complicated. How about 2 more questions? Somebody who has an answer. Well, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I read with great interest the story in the Times Magazine on Sunday on Laura Poitras.
Could you comment on that? It almost felt like McCarthy again. What was going on?
She's asking about a New York Times Magazine piece about Laura Poitras, who's an associate of Glenn Greenwald, a filmmaker who separately has been doing very important work on the surveillance area. And she gets held at the airport, put through all kinds of things. By the way, she and Glenn Greenwald's partner, they took their stuff. They took their computers, their hard drives, their game players, and they kept them. Now, why is this not a headline? I mean, don't you think that's outrageous with no explanation and never have to return it? Did you hear that yesterday or the day before, the British police went into the Guardian and went down to the basement where their computers are, where they had these publicly available documents, and they destroyed the computers. They physically crunched the metal. Now, those documents are available elsewhere, and so what's that about except intimidation? It really makes you wonder. Let's do one last question. Yes, young man.
How do other countries regard, I guess, the NSA surveillance program and, I guess, the country's reaction to the public's reaction to it?
Great question. I'm delighted to see somebody your age here. I wish we had more young people involved in caring about these things. I think the younger generation has been largely sedated and distracted by devices and games and other kinds of things, and I'm hoping there are exceptions. We do see
By the adults.
and by the adults, and each of these things. I mean, you guys are the hope of the the future, and we desperately need you to care. So we'll hope you'll be an ambassador out there to spread this to other people. So the question was, how do other countries feel about the NSA? They feel badly about it. The Brazilians were horrified to find out about the amount of spying going on in Brazil by the NSA. The European countries were alarmed to find that the U.S. has been spying on our allies. And you know, when they were trying to get everybody to go along with the so-called coalition of the willing, I love that term, coalition of the willing and the kicking and the screaming, to go into Iraq, they needed a false front that everybody was, so they got Denmark and Micronesia, some of these other small places to go to get behind it, Estonia, to send 12 troops, and made a big deal. And the media made a big deal about how excited these countries were to all go into Iraq. Well, of course, they weren't excited at all, but it turns out we were spying on, when I say we, I mean our country was spying on all these people, and they were even spying on Tony Blair. I mean, they were spying on everybody. So, I mean, and then this guy says that they've been spying on Obama, so that'll tell you a little bit about why the president can't or won't do more than he does. All right, listen, thank you very much. Let's get some books, and then we'll adjourn outside.